Sarah Williams adjusted her white nursing cap for the 100th time that morning as she walked through the busy corridors of Walter Reed Army Medical Center. The sound of her new shoes squeaking against the polished floor made her wince with embarrassment. At 23, she was the youngest nurse on the trauma ward, and everyone seemed to know it. The year was 2003, and the hospital was filled with soldiers returning from overseas conflicts. Sarah had graduated nursing school just 3 months ago, and this was her first real job. Every day brought new challenges that her textbooks had never prepared her for. The senior nurses were kind but busy, and Sarah often felt like she was drowning in a sea of medical procedures, patient care, and military protocols she barely understood. "Williams, you're assigned to room 314 today," called out Nurse Patricia Henderson, the ward supervisor. Patricia was a stern woman in her 50s who had been working with military patients for over 20 years. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes held the weight of countless difficult cases. Sarah nodded nervously and checked her clipboard. Room 314 housed Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen, a 28-year-old soldier who had been brought in 3 days ago with severe injuries from an explosion overseas. The medical chart showed multiple fractures, internal bleeding that had required surgery, and what the doctors called psychological trauma, though Sarah wasn't entirely sure what that meant in practical terms. As she approached room 314, Sarah could hear muffled sounds from inside. She knocked gently and pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, with heavy curtains drawn across the windows. In the hospital bed lay a man who looked much older than his 28 years. His left leg was in traction, his right arm was in a cast, and bandages covered much of his torso. But it was his eyes that struck Sarah the most. They held a distant, haunted look that she had seen in other patients but never quite understood. "Good morning, Sergeant Chen," Sarah said softly, trying to keep her voice steady and professional. "I'm Sarah, your nurse for today. How are you feeling?" Marcus turned his head slightly to look at her, but didn't respond. His dark hair was disheveled, and several days of stubble covered his jaw. The silence stretched between them as Sarah checked his chart and tried to think of what to say next. "I need to check your vitals and change your bandages," she continued, moving closer to the bed. As she reached for the blood pressure cuff, Marcus suddenly grabbed her wrist with his uninjured hand. His grip was surprisingly strong for someone in his condition. "Wait," he said, his voice hoarse from disuse. "What's your name again?" "Sarah Williams," she replied, trying not to show how startled she was by his sudden movement. Marcus stared at her intently, his eyes searching her face. "Where are you from, Sarah Williams?" The question caught her off guard. Most patients didn't ask personal questions, especially not with such intensity. "I'm from a small town in Ohio," she answered honestly. "Why do you ask?" Instead of answering, Marcus released her wrist and lay back against his pillow. He closed his eyes, and Sarah thought their brief conversation was over. She began taking his blood pressure, noting that it was slightly elevated but within acceptable ranges for someone recovering from his injuries. As she worked, Sarah found herself stealing glances at her patient. Despite his injuries and the haunted look in his eyes, there was something about Marcus Chen that intrigued her. He wasn't like the other soldiers she had cared for. Most were either grateful for the attention or grumpy about being stuck in the hospital. Marcus seemed to be carrying a burden that went far beyond his physical wounds. "The bandages on my chest need changing," Marcus said suddenly, making Sarah jump slightly. "Of course," she replied, gathering the necessary supplies from the medical cart. "This might be uncomfortable." As Sarah began removing the old bandages, she noticed that Marcus was watching her carefully. His intense gaze made her nervous, and her hands shook slightly as she worked. The wound underneath was healing well, but she could see the jagged scars that would remain long after he left the hospital. "You're new," Marcus observed. It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" Sarah asked, trying to focus on applying the fresh bandages properly. "You're too careful. Too gentle. The experienced nurses work faster, more efficiently. They've seen too much to worry about causing a little discomfort." Sarah felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I'm sorry if I'm taking too long." Don't apologize, Marcus said, his voice softer than before. It's not a bad thing. Most of us here have forgotten what gentle feels like. The comment hung in the air between them as Sarah finished with the bandages. She began to clean up her supplies, but Marcus spoke again. Sarah from Ohio, he said, and there was something different in his tone. Have you ever heard the call sign Angel 7? Sarah froze, the medical tape falling from her hands. The call sign hit her like a physical blow, bringing back memories she had tried to bury. Her brother David had been a pilot in the Air Force. He had used the call sign Angel 7 during his missions overseas. David had been killed in action 2 years ago, and Sarah had never told anyone at the hospital about her loss. She had wanted to start fresh, without the weight of her family's military connection. How do you know that name? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus struggled to sit up straighter in his bed, wincing from the pain in his ribs. David Williams was your brother, wasn't he? Sarah's hands began to tremble, and she had to grip the side rail of the hospital bed to steady herself. Yes, she managed to say. But, how could you possibly know that? Because Angel 7 saved my life, Marcus said, his eyes never leaving her face. Your brother saved my entire unit. The room seemed to spin around Sarah as the words sank in. She had known that David had died in a rescue mission, but the military had given her family very few details. They had said his sacrifice had saved lives, but they couldn't tell them whose lives or how it had happened. The information was classified, they said. David's funeral had been full of military honors and flag ceremonies, but Sarah had never met anyone who had actually known her brother or could tell her what kind of person he was during his final months. Tell me, Sarah said, sinking into the chair beside Marcus's bed. Please tell me about my brother. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding how much to share. Your brother was flying supply runs to forward operating bases, he began slowly. My unit was stationed at a remote outpost that had been cut off from regular supply lines for weeks. We were running low on everything: food, medical supplies, ammunition. Sarah leaned forward, hanging on every word. This was more than she had ever learned about David's final mission. The weather was terrible that day, Marcus continued. High winds, limited visibility. 3 other pilots had already turned back, saying it was too dangerous to attempt a landing. But Angel 7 came through on the radio, calm as anything, saying he was going to try. As Marcus spoke, Sarah could almost see her brother in her mind. David had always been fearless, sometimes to a fault. Growing up, he had been the one to climb the highest trees, to explore the abandoned buildings on the edge of town, to stand up to bullies even when they were bigger than him. Your brother managed to land on our makeshift runway, Marcus said. But, as he was unloading the supplies, we came under attack. Mortar shells started falling all around us. Most of the guys dove for cover, but your brother stayed with his aircraft. He knew we needed those medical supplies more than anything else. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't want to interrupt Marcus's story. I was hit by shrapnel from one of the first shells, Marcus continued, touching his chest where Sarah had just changed his bandages. I was bleeding pretty badly, and 2 other guys in my unit were hurt even worse. Your brother could have taken off immediately, his aircraft wasn't damaged yet, and he could have made it out safely. But he didn't leave, Sarah said, knowing her brother well enough to guess what had happened next. No, he didn't leave, Marcus confirmed. Instead, Angel 7 loaded the 3 of us wounded soldiers into his aircraft. He said he wasn't leaving anyone behind. The attack was getting worse, and we all knew the runway might not be usable much longer. Marcus paused, and Sarah could see the pain in his eyes as he relived the memory. Your brother got us airborne just as another mortar shell hit the runway. But our aircraft took damage during takeoff. Something was wrong with the engine, I could hear it struggling. Angel 7 was fighting the controls, trying to keep us in the air long enough to reach a safe landing zone. Sarah's hands were clenched tightly in her lap. She had always wondered about David's final moments, and now she was finally getting answers she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. We flew for maybe 20 minutes, Marcus said. Your brother was on the radio the whole time, coordinating with rescue teams, giving them our position. He never once mentioned that he was having trouble with the aircraft. He kept telling us everything was going to be fine, that we were going to make it home. What happened? Sarah asked, though part of her didn't want to know. The engine failed completely about 10 miles from the nearest base, Marcus said quietly. Angel 7 managed to keep the aircraft stable long enough for us to see the landing strip ahead. But he couldn't maintain altitude. He had to choose, try to save the aircraft and risk all our lives, or... Marcus trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Or sacrifice himself to save you, Sarah completed the thought. Marcus nodded. He put the aircraft down in a field just short of the runway. The impact was hard, but all three of us wounded soldiers survived. Your brother. Marcus's voice broke slightly. Angel 7 didn't make it out of the cockpit. Sarah sat in silence for several minutes, processing what she had learned. Her brother had died saving the lives of 3 soldiers, including the man lying in the hospital bed in front of her. The knowledge brought both comfort and fresh grief. I've thought about him every day since then, Marcus said. When I was recovering from my first set of injuries, when I was going through physical therapy, when I went back into combat. Angel 7 became a symbol for our entire unit. We started using his call sign as a way to remember what real courage looks like. Is that why you're here now? Sarah asked. More injuries from combat? Marcus nodded grimly. I volunteered for another tour overseas. I felt like I owed it to your brother to keep fighting, to make his sacrifice mean something. But, 3 weeks ago, our convoy hit an improvised explosive device. 3 soldiers died, and several of us were badly injured. Sarah felt a mix of admiration and frustration. She understood Marcus's desire to honor her brother's memory, but she also saw the cost it was taking on him. David wouldn't want you to keep putting yourself in danger because of him, she said gently. How can you be sure? Marcus asked. Sarah thought about her brother, remembering the countless conversations they had shared growing up. Because David always said that the point of saving someone's life isn't so they can throw it away later. He used to tell me that life is precious, and wasting it is the worst kind of disrespect you can show to the people who sacrificed for you. Marcus was quiet for a long time, considering her words. I never knew Angel 7 had a sister, he finally said. And I never knew he had saved a soldier named Marcus Chen, Sarah replied. I guess we both learned something today. As Sarah gathered her medical supplies and prepared to leave the room, Marcus called out to her. Sarah? Yes? Thank you for taking care of me. And thank you for letting me tell you about your brother. I've been carrying that story for 2 years, and I never thought I'd get the chance to share it with someone who would understand what it meant. Sarah paused at the door, looking back at the wounded soldier who had known her brother in his final moments. I'll be back tomorrow, she said. Maybe you can tell me more about him. For the first time since she had entered the room, Marcus smiled. I'd like that. As Sarah walked down the hospital corridor, her squeaky shoes no longer seemed important. She had started her shift as a nervous rookie nurse taking care of just another patient. But now everything had changed. She was caring for a man who had known her brother, who had been saved by David's courage and sacrifice. The weight of that knowledge was both overwhelming and strangely comforting. For the first time since David's death, Sarah felt connected to his military service in a way that went beyond the folded flag and the formal condolence letters. Through Marcus Chen, she was getting a glimpse of who her brother had been during his final months, not just a pilot with a call sign, but a person who had made the ultimate sacrifice to save the lives of fellow soldiers. Sarah knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges as she continued learning to be a nurse. But now she also knew that she was part of something larger than herself, a connection between the living and the dead, between sacrifice and healing, between a brother who had given his life and a sister who was dedicated to saving others. The injured soldier in room 314 had seized her attention with those 3 words, Angel 7. And, in doing so, he had given her back a piece of her brother that she had thought was lost forever. The next morning, Sarah arrived at Walter Reed Army Medical Center 30 minutes earlier than her shift required. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with questions about her brother David and the man who claimed he had saved his life. She had called her parents in Ohio, but decided not to tell them about meeting Marcus yet. The conversation with her mother had been difficult enough. Talking about David always brought back the raw grief they all carried. As she walked through the hospital corridors toward room 314, Sarah noticed details she had missed before. The walls were lined with photographs of military personnel, many of them young men and women who would never return home. She wondered how many of these soldiers had call signs like Angel 7, and how many families would never know the stories of their loved ones' final acts of courage. Sarah knocked softly on Marcus's door before entering. He was awake, sitting up in bed and staring out the window at the gray October morning. His breakfast tray sat untouched on the bedside table, and Sarah could see that he hadn't slept well either. The shadows under his eyes were deeper, and his hands were clenched tightly in his lap. "Good morning, Sergeant Chen," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice professional despite the personal connection they had discovered. "Marcus," he corrected. "After yesterday, I think we can skip the formal titles." Sarah smiled and moved to check his chart. His vital signs from the night shift showed elevated heart rate and blood pressure, suggesting he had been experiencing anxiety or pain during the night. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, beginning her routine examination. "Not much," Marcus admitted. "I keep having the same dream. I'm back in that aircraft with Angel 7, but this time I can see his face clearly. He looks exactly like you." The observation sent a chill through Sarah. She and David had always been told they looked alike, sharing the same dark blonde hair and green eyes that they had inherited from their father. "Tell me more about that day," Sarah said as she checked his bandages. "What was David like during the flight?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much detail to share. "He was calm," he finally said. "Calmer than anyone had a right to be in that situation. Even when the aircraft was struggling, even when we all knew we were in serious trouble, Angel 7 kept talking to us. He asked about our families, our hometowns. He wanted to know what we were planning to do when we got home." Sarah paused in her work, her hands stilling on the fresh bandages. "That sounds like David. He always tried to distract people when they were scared or hurt." "One of the other soldiers with us was just 18 years old," Marcus continued. "Private Johnson from Tennessee. He was crying, terrified that he was going to die without ever seeing his girlfriend again. Your brother spent 10 minutes talking to Johnson about this girl, asking about their plans to get married, making him describe what she looked like." As Marcus spoke, Sarah could picture the scene. David had always been good with people, able to find common ground with anyone. It made sense that he would use those skills to comfort frightened soldiers during what turned out to be their final flight together. "What about you?" Sarah asked. "What did David talk to you about?" Marcus looked uncomfortable, as if the memory brought back difficult emotions. "He asked about my family, but I didn't want to talk about them. My parents had been against me enlisting in the first place. They owned a small restaurant in San Francisco's Chinatown, and they wanted me to stay home and help run the business. When I told Angel 7 about the situation, he said something that stuck with me." "What did he say?" "He said that sometimes the best way to honor your family is to become the person they raised you to be, even if it's not the life they planned for you. He said courage isn't about doing what's easy or safe, it's about doing what's right, even when it costs you everything." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. Those words sounded exactly like something David would say. Throughout their childhood, he had always been the one to stand up for what was right, even when it got him in trouble. After the crash, Marcus continued, "I understood what he meant. Your brother could have saved himself, but that wouldn't have been who he was. He was the kind of person who couldn't live with himself if he left others behind." Sarah finished changing Marcus's bandages and moved to check his leg, which was still in traction. The bones were healing properly, but she could see that he was experiencing significant pain. "Have you been taking your pain medication?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "I don't like how it makes me feel. Too foggy, too disconnected. The pain isn't helping you heal any faster, Sarah said gently. And it's probably why you're not sleeping. The nightmares are why I'm not sleeping, Marcus corrected. The pain medication just makes them worse. Sarah had heard about combat-related nightmares from other nurses, but she had never dealt with them directly. Most of the psychological care was handled by specialized therapists, not the nursing staff. Do you want to talk about the nightmares? She asked. Marcus looked at her carefully, as if trying to decide whether she could handle what he might tell her. They're not always about the crash, he said finally. Sometimes they're about the explosion that brought me here. Sometimes they're about other things that happened overseas. But, last night, after talking to you, they were all about your brother. What kind of dreams? I keep reliving that moment when the aircraft was going down, Marcus said, his voice becoming strained. But, in the dream, I can see Angel 7's face, and he's asking me to deliver a message to his family. He's asking me to tell them something important, but I can never remember what it was when I wake up. Sarah sat down in the chair beside Marcus's bed. Maybe your mind is trying to process the fact that you finally found someone from David's family. Maybe the dreams will stop now that you've told me about what happened. Maybe, Marcus said, but he didn't sound convinced. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes while Sarah updated his medical chart. She was beginning to understand that caring for Marcus would involve more than just treating his physical injuries. Like many soldiers returning from combat, he was carrying psychological wounds that were harder to see but just as real as his broken bones. Can I ask you something? Marcus said suddenly. Of course. Why did you become a nurse? Was it because of what happened to your brother? Sarah considered the question carefully. Partly, she admitted. After David died, I felt like I needed to do something meaningful with my life. Something that would honor his sacrifice. But, it was more than that. What do you mean? David always said that the most important thing in life is taking care of the people around you, Sarah explained. He used to volunteer at a local nursing home when we were in high school. He would spend hours talking to the elderly residents, listening to their stories, helping them feel less alone. Marcus nodded, encouraging her to continue. When he joined the Air Force, David wrote me a letter explaining his decision. He said that serving his country was just a larger version of what he had always tried to do, protect people who couldn't protect themselves. He made me promise that I would find my own way to serve others, even if I didn't choose a military career. So you chose nursing, Marcus observed. I chose nursing, Sarah confirmed. But I had no idea how hard it would be. Medical school teaches you about diseases and treatments and procedures, but nobody teaches you how to handle the emotional side of caring for people who are suffering. Is it harder because of your brother? Marcus asked. Sarah thought about the question. Yes and no. It's harder because every injured soldier reminds me of David in some way. But it's also easier because I feel like I'm honoring his memory every time I help someone heal. As they talked, Sarah realized that she was learning as much about herself as she was about Marcus. The conversation was helping her process her own grief while also providing comfort to a soldier who had been carrying survivor's guilt for 2 years. A knock on the door interrupted their discussion. Dr. Robert Martinez, the orthopedic surgeon overseeing Marcus's care, entered the room with 2 other medical professionals that Sarah didn't recognize. Good morning, Sergeant Chen, Dr. Martinez said. I'd like you to meet Dr. Patricia Summers from our psychiatric department and Captain James Wilson from the military liaison office. Sarah started to leave, assuming that Marcus would want privacy for what seemed like an important medical consultation, but he called out to her. Sarah, could you stay? Please? She looked at Dr. Martinez, who nodded his approval. Nurse Williams has been providing excellent care for Sergeant Chen, the doctor said. If he's comfortable with her presence, she's welcome to stay. Dr. Summers was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and graying brown hair. She pulled up a chair beside Marcus's bed and spoke in a gentle voice. Sergeant Chen, we've been reviewing your case, and we think it would be beneficial for you to participate in some counseling sessions while you're recovering from your physical injuries. Marcus tensed visibly. What kind of counseling? Therapy designed specifically for combat veterans, Dr. Summers explained. We found that soldiers who experience traumatic events overseas often benefit from talking through their experiences with trained professionals. I'm fine, Marcus said quickly. I just need my bones to heal so I can get back to duty. Captain Wilson, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. Actually, Sergeant, that's something we need to discuss. Given the extent of your injuries and your medical history, the Army is recommending that you consider a medical discharge. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah could see the shock and anger in his eyes as he processed what Captain Wilson had just told him. Medical discharge? Marcus repeated. But I'm going to recover fully. Dr. Martinez said my bones are healing ahead of schedule. Your physical recovery is going well, Dr. Martinez agreed. But you've been injured in combat multiple times over the past 2 years. The medical board feels that continued active duty would put you at unnecessary risk. That's not their decision to make, Marcus said, his voice rising. I volunteered to serve my country, and I'm not done serving. Sarah could see that Marcus was becoming agitated, his heart rate monitor showing increased stress levels. She moved closer to the bed, instinctively wanting to provide comfort but not sure how to help. The decision isn't final yet, Captain Wilson said. You'll have the opportunity to present your case to a medical review board. But I wanted you to be aware of the recommendation so you could start thinking about civilian career options. Civilian career options? Marcus's voice was bitter. The Army is my career. It's who I am. Dr. Summers leaned forward. That's exactly why we think counseling would be beneficial. Many soldiers struggle with identity issues when transitioning back to civilian life. We can help you explore who Marcus Chen is outside of his military service. I know who I am, Marcus snapped. I'm a soldier. I'm someone who doesn't abandon his responsibilities or his fellow servicemen. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the intensity of Marcus's response. Sarah could see that his reaction went much deeper than just anger about a potential medical discharge. He was fighting to hold on to an identity that had been shaped by his military service and his sense of duty to honor her brother's sacrifice. Can we have a few minutes alone? Sarah asked the medical team. I think Sergeant Chen needs some time to process this information. Dr. Martinez nodded. We'll be back later this afternoon to discuss treatment options. Take your time, Sergeant. After the doctors and Captain Wilson left, Marcus slammed his uninjured hand against the bed rail in frustration. They want to discharge me, he said bitterly. 2 years ago, Angel 7 saved my life, and now they want me to just walk away from the military like none of it mattered. That's not what they're saying, Sarah said gently. They're trying to take care of you the same way David would have wanted. You don't understand, Marcus replied. The Army is all I have left. My parents disowned me when I enlisted against their wishes. I don't have a girlfriend or a wife waiting for me at home. My entire identity is built around being a soldier. Sarah sat down beside his bed again. David would understand that feeling, she said. But he would also want you to have a life worth living. That's why he saved you, not so you could spend the rest of your years getting injured in combat, but so you could have the chance to build something meaningful. What if I don't know how to build anything meaningful outside the military? Marcus asked. The vulnerability in his question touched Sarah deeply. She was beginning to understand that Marcus's physical injuries were just the surface of his struggles. Underneath, he was dealing with survivor's guilt, identity confusion, and the fear of losing the only life he knew how to live. Then, maybe that's what you need to learn while you're here, Sarah suggested. Maybe this isn't just about healing your broken bones. Maybe it's about figuring out how to honor David's sacrifice in a way that doesn't require you to keep putting yourself in danger. Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. I don't know how to do that, he finally admitted. You don't have to figure it out all at once, Sarah said. But maybe you could start by talking to Dr. Summers. Not because you're broken or weak, but because you want to make sure you're living the kind of life that would make Angel 7 proud. For the first time since the medical team had left, Marcus looked directly at Sarah.
Would you come with me? To the counseling sessions, I mean.
I know it's not part of your job, but.
But, what?
But, you're Angel 7's sister, Marcus said.
If anyone can help me figure out how to honor his memory properly, it's you.
Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was just a rookie nurse, barely qualified to handle the medical aspects of patient care, let alone the complex emotional needs of a combat veteran. But, looking at Marcus, she saw someone who desperately needed connection and understanding.
I'll talk to Dr. Summers, Sarah promised. If she thinks it would be helpful, and if the hospital allows it, I'll be there.
For the first time since she had met him, Marcus smiled without reservation.
Thank you, Sarah. I think Angel 7 would be proud of his sister.
As Sarah prepared to continue her rounds with other patients, she realized that her relationship with Marcus was evolving beyond the typical nurse-patient dynamic. She was becoming invested in his recovery in a way that went far beyond professional duty. Through caring for the soldier her brother had saved, Sarah was discovering her own strength and purpose as a healer.
3 weeks had passed since Sarah first learned about Marcus Chen's connection to her brother David.
The hospital routine had become familiar, but each day brought new revelations about both Marcus's past and her own capacity for healing others. Dr. Summers had agreed to include Sarah in some of the counseling sessions, recognizing that her presence seemed to help Marcus open up about his experiences. Sarah entered room 314 on a Tuesday morning to find Marcus attempting to stand beside his bed with the help of crutches. His left leg was finally out of traction, and physical therapy had begun the week before. She could see the determination in his face as he struggled to maintain his balance, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort. "You're supposed to have a physical therapist with you when you're practicing with those," Sarah said, hurrying to his side. "I wanted to surprise everyone," Marcus replied, his voice strained but proud.
"I'd been working on this since 5 in the morning.
Sarah positioned herself nearby, ready to catch him if he fell.
"How does it feel?"
"Like my leg is made of rubber and my head is full of cotton," Marcus admitted with a weak smile.
"But I'm standing. 3 weeks ago, the doctors weren't sure I'd ever walk normally again."
As Marcus slowly lowered himself back into the bed, Sarah marveled at his progress. His physical recovery had been remarkable, aided by his determination to prove that he could return to active duty. But she knew that his emotional healing was more complicated. "Dr. Summers wants to see us both this afternoon," Sarah said, helping him get comfortable. "She says you've made significant progress in your individual sessions." Marcus nodded, but his expression became more serious.
"She's been asking me to think about what I want to do if the medical board decides against my return to active duty. Have you been thinking about it?"
"That's all I think about," Marcus replied. "But every time I try to imagine myself in civilian clothes, doing a regular job, I feel like I'm betraying Angel 7's sacrifice." Sarah had heard variations of this concern from Marcus many times over the past weeks. His survivor's guilt had become intertwined with his military identity in a way that made it difficult for him to consider any future outside the army. "Tell me something," Sarah said, settling into the chair that had become her usual spot beside his bed.
"When you think about David saving your life, what do you think he wanted for you?"
Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering the question.
"He wanted me to live," he said finally. "Just live? Or live well? I don't know what the difference is."
Sarah leaned forward, choosing her words carefully.
"David always told me that life is a gift, and the way we honor gifts is by using them well."
"He didn't save your life so you could spend it feeling guilty or putting yourself in danger. He saved it so you could have the chance to make a difference in the world." "But I make a difference as a soldier," Marcus protested.
"You could make a difference in other ways too," Sarah pointed out. "What did you want to be before you enlisted?"
Marcus looked uncomfortable with the question. "I was supposed to help run my family's restaurant.
But that was never what I wanted." "What did you want?" "It's going to sound stupid. Try me." Marcus hesitated for a long moment before answering. "I wanted to be a teacher."
Specifically, I wanted to teach history to high school students.
The admission surprised Sarah.
In all their conversations, Marcus had never mentioned anything about education or working with young people.
That doesn't sound stupid at all, she said. What made you interested in teaching?
I had this history teacher in high school, Mr. Rodriguez, who made the past come alive, Marcus explained, his voice becoming more animated.
He didn't just talk about dates and battles.
He helped us understand how historical events shaped the world we live in today.
He made me realize that understanding the past is the key to making better decisions in the future. Sarah could see a different side of Marcus emerging as he talked about his former teacher.
The intensity and drive that he brought to his military service were still there, but they were channeled into something more nurturing.
Have you thought about teaching since you've been in the army? She asked.
Sometimes, Marcus admitted. Especially when I was working with younger soldiers. I enjoyed helping them understand tactics and strategy, sharing what I'd learned from experience.
That sounds like teaching to me.
Before Marcus could respond, there was a knock on the door.
A young soldier in dress uniform entered the room, followed by an older woman in civilian clothes.
The soldier looked to be about 19 or 20, with nervous energy and bright eyes that reminded Sarah of her brother David when he was that age.
Sergeant Chen, the young soldier said.
I'm Private First Class Michael Rodriguez, and this is my mother, Maria Rodriguez.
Marcus looked confused. I'm sorry, do we know each other?
Not exactly, Private Rodriguez replied.
But, you knew my uncle, Carlos Rodriguez.
He was one of the soldiers on Angel 7's aircraft when it went down 2 years ago.
Sarah felt her breath catch.
Carlos Rodriguez must have been one of the other wounded soldiers that David had rescued along with Marcus. Carlos was my brother, Maria Rodriguez said, stepping forward with tears in her eyes. He died from his injuries 3 days after the crash, but, before he died, he told me about the soldier who had helped keep him calm during the flight. He said there was a staff sergeant named Chen who talked him through the worst moments, who helped him stay focused on getting home to his family. Marcus stared at the woman in shock.
Carlos talked about me?
He said you told him stories about your family's restaurant, about growing up in San Francisco, Maria continued. My brother was scared that he was going to die, but you made him feel less alone during those final minutes in the aircraft. Private Rodriguez stepped closer to Marcus's bed. After Uncle Carlos died, my mother told me the story many times. When I decided to enlist in the army last year, I asked to be stationed here at Walter Reed specifically because I hoped I might meet you someday.
I don't understand, Marcus said. Carlos died. I couldn't save him.
You couldn't save his life, Maria Rodriguez agreed.
But, you saved his final moments.
Because of you, my brother didn't die alone and afraid. He died knowing that someone cared about him, that someone was willing to share their own fear in order to help him cope with his.
Sarah watched Marcus struggle to process this information.
For 2 years, he had focused on the fact that David Williams had saved his life, but he had never considered that his own actions during the flight might have provided comfort to the other wounded soldiers. Carlos left me a letter before he died, Maria continued, reaching into her purse.
Part of it was about you.
She handed Marcus a piece of paper, yellowed with age and worn from being folded and unfolded many times. Marcus read silently, his hands trembling slightly as he held the letter.
What does it say? Sarah asked gently.
Marcus's voice was thick with emotion as he read aloud, Tell the sergeant who sat with me that his kindness meant everything. Tell him that if I don't make it home, I hope he will live the kind of life that honors all the people who didn't get that chance. Tell him that courage isn't just about fighting, it's also about caring for others when they need it most. The room was silent as the words sank in. Sarah could see that Marcus was viewing his experience on the aircraft from an entirely new perspective. I've been carrying guilt for 2 years about Carlos's death, Marcus said quietly. I thought I had failed him. You didn't fail anyone, Maria Rodriguez replied firmly. My brother's final letter talked about 3 men, Angel 7, who saved their lives through his sacrifice, Sergeant Chen who provided comfort when they were afraid, and Private Johnson who reminded them all why they wanted to live. You were all heroes in different ways. Private Rodriguez stepped forward.
That's actually why I wanted to meet you, Sergeant.
I'm being deployed overseas next month, and I wanted to ask if you had any advice for a young soldier who wants to make a difference. Marcus looked at the earnest young man standing before him, and Sarah could see him processing everything that had happened over the past few minutes. The most important thing I learned, Marcus said slowly, is that being a soldier isn't just about fighting. It's about taking care of the people around you. Sometimes that means being willing to sacrifice yourself for others, like Angel 7 did. Sometimes it means providing comfort to someone who is afraid, like I tried to do for your uncle. And sometimes it means choosing to live well, to honor the people who didn't get that opportunity. Private Rodriguez nodded seriously, absorbing every word. Can I ask you something? Marcus said to the young soldier. Of course, Sergeant. What do you want to do with your life after your military service is complete? I want to be a teacher, Private Rodriguez replied without hesitation. My uncle Carlos was working on his teaching degree before he enlisted. He always said that education was the key to helping people build better lives. Marcus and Sarah exchanged a meaningful look. The connection between teaching and service was becoming impossible to ignore. That's a good goal, Marcus said. Teaching is another form of service. Instead of protecting people with weapons, you protect them with knowledge. After the Rodriguez family left, Marcus and Sarah sat in contemplative silence. The visit had clearly affected Marcus deeply, challenging his understanding of his own role in the events of 2 years ago. I never realized, Marcus said finally. Realized what? That I had been so focused on Angel 7's heroism that I never considered my own actions during that flight. I thought I was just a passenger, someone who was saved. But maybe I was also someone who helped. Sarah nodded. David saved your lives by flying you to safety, but you saved Carlos Rodriguez's emotional well-being during his final conscious moments. Those are both important forms of rescue. Dr. Summers has been trying to get me to understand that I have value beyond my military service, Marcus continued. But I couldn't see it. I thought my only worth came from being a good soldier. And now? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the autumn afternoon. Now I'm thinking about what Private Rodriguez said about his uncle wanting to be a teacher. And I'm thinking about how much I enjoyed helping younger soldiers learn and grow. Maybe there's a way to combine your military experience with your interest in education, Sarah suggested. What do you mean? You could teach history, like you always wanted, Sarah explained. But you could bring a unique perspective to it. You've lived through historical events, not just studied them. You understand the human cost of conflict in a way that most teachers never could. Marcus considered this possibility. I could help students understand that history isn't just about dates and battles. It's about real people making difficult decisions under impossible circumstances. Exactly, Sarah agreed. You could help them learn from the past in a way that prepares them to make better choices in the future. But what about the medical board review? Marcus asked. What if they decide I'm fit for active duty? Sarah chose her words carefully. Then, you'll have a decision to make about what kind of service will best honor David's sacrifice and Carlos's memory. But at least now you know you have options. As if summoned by their conversation, Dr. Summers appeared at the door, ready for their scheduled counseling session. How are we feeling today? She asked, noticing the thoughtful expressions on both Sarah and Marcus's faces. Different, Marcus replied honestly. I had visitors today who helped me see things from a new perspective. Dr. Summers settled into her chair and opened her notebook. Over the past few weeks, these sessions had become a collaborative effort, with Sarah providing emotional support while Dr. Summers offered professional guidance. Tell me about this new perspective, Dr. Summers said. Marcus described his visit from the Rodriguez family, explaining how their story had changed his understanding of his own actions during the aircraft crash. Dr. Summers listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions. It sounds like you're beginning to see yourself as someone who provides care and comfort to others, she observed. How does that feel? Scary, Marcus admitted. For 2 years, I've defined myself as someone who was saved, not someone who saves others. If I accept that I have the ability to help and heal people, then I have to take responsibility for how I use that ability.
And taking responsibility feels frightening?
It feels like a huge obligation, Marcus replied. If I have the power to make a difference in people's lives, then I have to make sure I'm using that power in the right way.
Sarah spoke up. But isn't that obligation something you've already been carrying? You've been trying to honor David's sacrifice through your military service. This would just be a different way of serving others.
Sarah's right, Dr. Summers agreed. You've already been living with the sense that your life has meaning and purpose. What we're talking about now is expanding your understanding of how that purpose can be fulfilled. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, processing the conversation. If I decide not to fight the medical board's recommendation, he said slowly, if I choose to leave the army and pursue teaching, how do I know I'm making the right decision?
How do you know any decision is right? Dr. Summers asked in return.
I don't know, Marcus admitted.
That's the challenge of moving forward after trauma, Dr. Summers explained. You can't know for certain what the future holds.
But you can make choices based on your values, your strengths, and your desire to contribute positively to the world.
Sarah leaned forward. What would David want for you? Not what would make him proud of your service, but what would make him happy about your life?
Marcus considered the question seriously. Angel 7 would want me to be the kind of person who helps others when they need it most. Whether that's as a soldier or as a teacher, the important thing would be that I'm using my life to make things better for other people.
And do you think you could do that as a teacher? Dr. Summers asked.
I think I could try, Marcus replied. I think I could help young people understand that history is about more than just memorizing facts. I could help them see that the choices we make today will become the history that future generations study. As their session concluded, Sarah realized that Marcus was finally beginning to imagine a future beyond his military identity. The process was difficult and uncertain, but he was starting to see possibilities that he couldn't envision just a few weeks earlier. There's something I want to ask both of you, Marcus said as Dr. Summers packed up her notes.
What's that?
Sarah replied. When I do leave the hospital, when I start figuring out this new life, would you stay in touch? I know you have your own career and your own life to live, but I feel like Angel 7 brought us together for a reason. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. Over the past few weeks, caring for Marcus had become more than just a job. He had helped her understand her brother's final moments and had shown her the impact that compassionate care could have on someone's healing process.
I'd like that, she said. I'd like to know how your story turns out.
Our story, Marcus corrected.
This isn't just my journey anymore. You're part of it now.
As Sarah prepared to leave the room, she reflected on how much had changed since that first day when Marcus had grabbed her wrist and uttered the call sign Angel 7. What had begun as a shocking revelation had evolved into a meaningful relationship that was helping both of them heal from their respective traumas. The injured soldier had seized the rookie nurse's attention with those 3 words, but, in the process, they had both discovered something neither of them had expected to find: a connection that transcended their individual grief and pointed toward a future filled with purpose and hope. 6 months had passed since Sarah Williams first heard Marcus Chen speak her brother's call sign in room 314 of Walter Reed Army Medical Center. The autumn leaves had given way to winter snow, which had melted into spring rain, and now the hospital grounds were green with new growth. Sarah stood at the window of what had once been Marcus's room, watching visitors and staff move through the courtyard below. The room was empty now, prepared for the next wounded soldier who would need care and healing. Marcus had been discharged 3 weeks ago, after the medical review board officially recommended his transition to civilian life. But his departure from the hospital didn't mark the end of their story. It marked the beginning of a new chapter that neither Sarah nor Marcus could have imagined when they first met. Dr. Patricia Summers knocked on the open door behind Sarah. I thought I might find you here, she said with a knowing smile.
It's hard to let go of rooms where important healing happened, isn't it? Sarah turned from the window.
I keep thinking about that first day, when Marcus grabbed my wrist and said those 3 words that changed everything. If I had been assigned to a different patient, if he had been too sedated to speak, if I had left the room a minute earlier. But none of those things happened, Dr. Summers reminded her. Sometimes the universe has a way of bringing people together when they need each other most.
How is he doing? Sarah asked.
Have you heard from him since he started the teaching program?
Dr. Summers' smile widened. He's thriving.
Better than I expected, actually. The transition from military life to academia isn't easy for most veterans, but Marcus seems to have found his calling. 3 months earlier, Marcus had enrolled in an accelerated master's degree program in education at George Washington University. The program was specifically designed for military veterans who wanted to become teachers, combining their real-world experience with formal pedagogy training. Marcus had chosen to specialize in teaching history to high school students, just as he had dreamed of doing before his military service. He sent me his lesson plan from last week, Dr. Summers continued. He's doing his student teaching at a high school in downtown D.C., and his mentor teacher says the students are completely engaged with his classes.
Sarah felt a warm sense of pride hearing about Marcus's success.
During their counseling sessions together, she had watched him struggle with the idea of leaving military life behind. Now, it seemed he had found a way to channel his sense of service into something equally meaningful.
What makes his teaching so effective? Sarah asked.
He brings history to life for his students, Dr. Summers explained. Instead of just teaching about World War II or the Vietnam War, he helps them understand what it feels like to be a soldier far from home, what motivates people to make sacrifices for others, how ordinary individuals become heroes in extraordinary circumstances. As Dr. Summers spoke, Sarah remembered the countless hours she had spent listening to Marcus work through his experiences. His ability to articulate the emotional reality of military service had been one of his strengths during therapy. It made sense that he would excel at helping young people understand the human dimension of historical events.
There's something else, Dr. Summers added.
Marcus has been working with a nonprofit organization that helps wounded veterans transition to civilian careers. He's been sharing his story with other soldiers who are struggling with similar identity issues.
The news didn't surprise Sarah.
During his recovery, Marcus had often talked about wanting to help other veterans who were dealing with survivor's guilt and uncertainty about their post-military futures.
He's living the kind of life that honors Angel 7's sacrifice, Sarah observed. And Carlos Rodriguez's memory, Dr.
Summers added. Marcus told me that he starts every school year by telling his students about the importance of caring for one another, using his experience on that aircraft as an example of how small acts of kindness can have lasting impact. Their conversation was interrupted by Sarah's pager. She was needed in the emergency department, where a new group of wounded soldiers had just arrived from overseas. As she prepared to leave, Dr. Summers called out to her.
Sarah, there's something else you should know about Marcus.
What's that?
He's been asking about you.
He wants to know if you'd be willing to speak to his students about your brother's service. He thinks hearing from Angel 7's family would help them understand the ripple effects of heroism.
The request caught Sarah off guard.
Over the past 6 months, she had focused on her work at the hospital, using the skills and insights she had gained from caring for Marcus to help other wounded veterans. Her confidence as a nurse had grown considerably, and she had been recognized by her supervisors for her exceptional patient care.
I don't know if I'm ready for something like that, Sarah admitted.
Think about it, Dr.
Summers suggested.
You've helped Marcus heal from his emotional wounds. Maybe you could help his students understand what service and sacrifice really mean. As Sarah made her way to the emergency department, she thought about Dr. Summers' suggestion. Speaking to high school students about David would mean sharing the most painful and personal experience of her life with strangers. But it would also mean helping young people understand the values that her brother had embodied: courage, selflessness, and dedication to protecting others.
The emergency department was busy when Sarah arrived.
A convoy had been attacked overseas, and multiple soldiers were being treated for various injuries. As she worked alongside the trauma team, Sarah found herself drawing on everything she had learned during Marcus's recovery. She knew how to provide not just medical care, but also emotional support to soldiers who were frightened and far from home. One of the patients was a young woman about Sarah's age who had suffered a leg injury similar to Marcus's original wounds. As Sarah helped prepare her for surgery, the soldier grabbed her hand much the way Marcus had done months earlier. "Am I going to be okay?" the soldier asked. Sarah looked into her eyes and saw the same fear and uncertainty that she had recognized in Marcus during those first difficult days. "Yes," she said with quiet confidence. "You're going to be okay. And, when you're ready, I'll help you figure out what comes next." After her shift ended, Sarah made her way to the hospital's memorial garden, a quiet space dedicated to military personnel who had died in service. David's name wasn't on any of the plaques there, but Sarah often came to this place when she needed to think about her brother and the impact his life had made on others. She sat on a bench beneath a flowering dogwood tree and pulled out her phone. She had been carrying Marcus's contact information for weeks but hadn't found the courage to call him. Tonight felt different. Tonight, she felt ready to take the next step in their shared journey. Marcus answered on the second ring. "Sarah. I was hoping you would call. Dr. Summers told me about your teaching," Sarah said. "She says you're doing amazing work with your students." "It's incredible," Marcus replied, and Sarah could hear the enthusiasm in his voice. "These kids are so smart and engaged. They ask questions that make me think about history in completely new ways. She also told me that you want me to speak to your class." There was a pause before Marcus responded. "I know it's a big ask. But, Sarah, you should see how these students respond when I talk about Angel 7. They understand that heroism isn't just about grand gestures, it's about ordinary people making extraordinary choices when it matters most." "What would you want me to talk about?" "Whatever you feel comfortable sharing," Marcus said. "Maybe what David was like as a person, what motivated him to serve, how his sacrifice has affected your own life choices. These students need to understand that the people we read about in history books were real individuals with families who loved them." Sarah considered the request carefully. "Would you be there with me?" "Of course. We're a team, remember? You helped me heal, and now we can help others together." The word team resonated with Sarah. Over the past 6 months, she and Marcus had developed a partnership that transcended their original nurse-patient relationship. They had helped each other process grief, find meaning in difficult experiences, and discover new ways to serve others. "Okay," Sarah said finally. "I'll do it." "Really?" "Really. But I want to tell them about more than just David's heroism. I want to tell them about your recovery too, about how one act of courage can ripple through multiple lives in ways we never expect." 2 weeks later, Sarah found herself standing in front of 30 high school students at Jefferson High School in downtown Washington, D.C. Marcus stood beside her, providing moral support as she prepared to share the most personal story of her life. The classroom walls were covered with historical timelines, maps, and photographs from various periods of American history. But Sarah's attention was focused on the faces of the teenagers in front of her, young people who would soon make their own choices about how to serve their communities and their country. "My brother David always said that history is made by ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things," Sarah began. "He never thought of himself as a hero. He just thought of himself as someone who had a job to do." For the next hour, Sarah told the students about David's life, his childhood in Ohio, his decision to join the Air Force, his dedication to helping others, and his final mission that saved the lives of 3 wounded soldiers. She talked about the call sign Angel 7 and what it meant to the soldiers who flew with him and fought alongside him. Then, she introduced Marcus, explaining how their chance meeting at Walter Reed had changed both of their lives. "Sergeant Chen taught me that heroism isn't just about the person who makes the ultimate sacrifice," Sarah continued. "It's also about the people who carry that sacrifice forward, who use their second chance at life to make the world a better place." Marcus spoke about his own journey from survivor's guilt to purposeful service, explaining how he had discovered that teaching was another form of protecting others, protecting them through education instead of through military action. "The same courage that made me a good soldier makes me a good teacher," Marcus told the students. "I'm still serving my country, just in a different way." During the question and answer session that followed, one student raised her hand.
Ms. Williams, how did taking care of Sergeant Chun change you as a person?
The question made Sarah think about everything that had happened since that first day in room 314.
Caring for Marcus taught me that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken, she said.
It's about helping people discover their strength and find new ways to use it. I became a better nurse because I learned to see the whole person, not just their medical condition.
Another student asked Marcus about his transition from military to civilian life. Was it hard to give up being a soldier?
I didn't give up being a soldier, Marcus replied. I just expanded my definition of what it means to serve others. Every day in this classroom, I'm fighting ignorance and helping young minds grow. That's still a form of combat, just with different weapons. After the presentation, several students approached Sarah and Marcus to continue the conversation. One young man named David, named after his grandfather who had served in Vietnam, told Sarah that her story had inspired him to consider a career in military nursing. I want to help wounded soldiers the way you helped Sergeant Chen, he said. Another student, a young woman named Maria, told Marcus that his story had made her think differently about what it means to be brave. I always thought courage was about not being afraid, she said.
But, you're saying it's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway.
Exactly, Marcus replied.
Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action in the presence of fear.
As they prepared to leave the school, Sarah reflected on how far she and Marcus had both traveled since their first meeting. She had grown from a nervous rookie nurse into a confident healthcare professional who specialized in caring for wounded veterans. Marcus had transformed from a broken soldier struggling with survivor's guilt into an inspired educator who was shaping the next generation of citizens.
Thank you, Marcus said as they walked to the parking lot.
For what?
For sharing David's story. For helping me heal.
For becoming my partner in this new mission.
Sarah smiled.
Thank you for grabbing my wrist that day and saying those 3 words that changed everything.
Angel 7, Marcus said quietly.
Angel 7, Sarah repeated. As they stood together in the afternoon sunshine, Sarah realized that her brother's call sign had become more than just a memory of his heroism. It had become a symbol of the ongoing connection between sacrifice and service, between those who give their lives for others and those who are inspired by that sacrifice to live lives of meaning and purpose. The injured soldier had seized the rookie nurse with a call sign she thought was lost forever. But, in finding each other, they had both discovered that some things are never truly lost, they just transform into something new and continue to make a difference in ways we never expect. David Williams, call sign Angel 7, had saved Marcus Chen's life on that aircraft 2 years ago. But, the ripple effects of that heroic act were still spreading, touching the lives of high school students, wounded veterans, and everyone who heard their story. Through Sarah's nursing care and Marcus's teaching, Angel 7's legacy continued to grow, proving that true heroism never dies, it just finds new ways to serve. 6 months later, Sarah received a letter from one of Marcus's former students. The young man had enlisted in the Air Force and was beginning pilot training. His letter was brief but powerful. Dear Ms. Williams and Mr. Chen, I wanted you to know that your presentation changed my life. I chose to become a pilot because I want to be like your brother David, someone who uses their skills to save others when they need it most. If I'm ever lucky enough to earn a call sign, I hope it will honor the memory of Angel 7 and the lesson you taught us about what real service means. Thank you for showing us that heroism isn't about being perfect, it's about being willing to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself. The letter was signed by David Martinez, and, at the bottom, he had written his training class number and a note, future call sign, Angel 8. Sarah called Marcus immediately to share the news. As they talked about the young pilot who had been inspired by their story, they both understood that they had become part of something larger than themselves. They were links in a chain of service that stretched from David's sacrifice through their own healing and into the future choices of young people they would never meet. The injured soldier had seized the rookie nurse, and together they had discovered that the most powerful call signs are the ones that echo through multiple generations, inspiring each new group of heroes to carry the mission forward.